The morning sun, usually a cheerful harbinger, felt almost mocking as it streamed into Eleanor's kitchen. At 60 years old, she still found joy in the simple act of arranging flowers. Today it was a delicate bouquet of pink roses, their petals soft and inviting. Beside them, nestled in tissue paper, was a hand-painted teacup set, an antique white porcelain adorned with tiny intricate bluebirds. She had found it at a local artisan market, convinced it would perfectly match Serafina's refined, if sometimes aloof, taste. This Mother's Day, Eleanor hoped, the gifts would serve as a bridge, a silent offering of peace and connection to her daughter-in-law. For years, she had felt a subtle but persistent chill from Serafina, a distance Eleanor longed to close. The phone rang, jolting her from her quiet reverie. It was Ethan, her son. His voice, usually robust and warm, sounded strained, almost hesitant. "Mom," he began, "about Mother's Day lunch. Serafina and I decided to keep it family only this year. Just us and the kids." A familiar pang of disappointment twisted in Eleanor's chest. Family only. The phrase hung in the air, a thinly veiled exclusion she had grown accustomed to over the years. She tried to swallow the lump forming in her throat, forcing a cheerful tone she didn't feel. "Oh, that's perfectly fine, dear. I understand. You all enjoy your day." A beat of uncomfortable silence stretched between them before Ethan added, his voice dropping slightly. "Serafina's parents are coming, though. They're already on their way." The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. Serafina's parents were family, but she, Eleanor, Ethan's own mother, was not. The casual cruelty of the clarification, the casual dismissal of her feelings, made her heart ache. It wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was a deliberate choice. Despite the crushing truth, a stubborn, maternal instinct urged her on. She had spent hours choosing those gifts, picturing Serafina's rare, slight smile. She couldn't just let them sit there. Driven by a desperate need to still feel connected, to somehow participate, Eleanor decided she would drive by their house, leave the gifts on the porch, and then quietly leave. Perhaps a note, a simple Happy Mother's Day. It was better than nothing, better than letting the chasm grow wider. The drive to their meticulously maintained suburban home felt long, each mile a testament to her unrequited efforts. As she pulled up, she saw Serafina's car in the driveway and the sounds of laughter drifting from an open window. Her heart fluttered, a mix of apprehension and a fragile hope. She parked a little down the street, clutching the gift bag, the delicate porcelain clinking softly inside. As she stepped out, she heard Serafina's voice, clear and cutting, carried by the breeze. "I made sure Ethan told her to stay away," Serafina was saying to someone inside, her tone laced with a distinct satisfaction. The words froze Eleanor in her tracks, the casual viciousness of it, the premeditation. It wasn't Ethan's idea alone. Serafina had orchestrated her exclusion. A cold dread seeped into Eleanor's bones. Then Serafina's voice continued. "She isn't invited this year, or any year if I have my way." Eleanor's breath hitched. Not just today, but any year. It was a complete and total banishment. The fragile hopes she'd nurtured for years, the ones that had pushed her to arrange those roses and find that teacup set, began to crumble. But the final blow was yet to come. Serafina's voice dropped, dripping with a venomous contempt that made Eleanor's blood run cold. "When that old hag finally goes into a nursing home, that would be cause for celebration." The words were like shards of ice, piercing through Eleanor's long-held illusions. Old hag. Nursing home. Not only was she unwanted, but her very existence was an annoyance. Her eventual decline a source of perverse joy. All the years of trying, of making excuses for Serafina's sharp tongue or cold shoulder, dissolved in that instant. This wasn't just dislike, it was pure, unadulterated hatred. The gift bag, heavy with her shattered hopes, slipped from Eleanor's trembling fingers. The delicate porcelain teacup set, meant to be a bridge, hit the concrete driveway with a sickening crack, shattering into 1,000 irreparable pieces. The pink roses tumbled out, their petals scattering like tears on the unforgiving pavement. Eleanor didn't pick them up. She simply stood there for a moment, the sound of Serafina's cruel laughter echoing in her ears, mingled with the faint, innocent giggles of her grandchildren. from inside the house. Then, moving as if in a daze, she got back into her car and drove home, the shattered porcelain and scattered roses a stark metaphor for her broken heart. The drive was a blur. She replayed Serafina's words, each syllable a fresh wound. Years of making excuses for Serafina's behavior now seemed utterly foolish. Eleanor had always rationalized it away. Serafina was busy. Serafina was stressed. Serafina just had a different way of showing affection. She had sacrificed so much, not just emotionally, but financially. Her own meager savings had been constantly tapped to help them out, for down payments, for car repairs, for just about anything Ethan asked for, always with Serafina's unspoken approval looming in the background. Back in the quiet solitude of her own home, Eleanor wandered into her study, her gaze falling upon her open checkbook. There it was, highlighted for payment. The $2,100 mortgage payment for Ethan and Serafina's house, due next week. A familiar ache, but this time it was different. It wasn't just the monetary amount, it was the sheer indignity of it. She was paying for the roof over the head of the woman who called her an old hag and longed for her to be institutionalized. With trembling hands, but a sudden surge of something akin to icy calm, Eleanor picked up the check. She looked at the payee's name, then at the numbers. Then, without another moment's hesitation, she ripped the check straight down the middle, the sound loud in the silent room. Her hands still shook, but a fierce determination replaced her earlier despair. She picked up the phone, her fingers punching in the bank's number with a newfound resolve. I need to stop all future payments on account number X for a property at Y address, she stated, her voice surprisingly steady. The words felt liberating, a heavy burden lifting from her shoulders. For the first time in what felt like months, Eleanor felt a sense of strength, a glimmer of freedom. The pain of being alone on Mother's Day was still there, a dull throb, but it was now overlaid with a powerful sense of agency. This wasn't just a sad holiday. This was the first day of her new life. She had allowed herself to be diminished for too long, to be a doormat. What kind of example was she setting for her grandchildren by allowing such cruel, disrespectful treatment? She deserved more. They deserved to see a grandmother who valued herself. The phone rang a beep bang, shattering the quiet. It was Ethan. Eleanor looked at the caller ID, then at the torn check on her desk. She watched the phone ring once, twice, 3 times until it finally fell silent. She didn't answer. She wouldn't. This was only the beginning of her path to reclaiming her dignity. The next 3 days passed in a haze of profound silence, each hour stretching longer than the last. Eleanor's small house, usually filled with the quiet hum of her daily routines, felt oppressively still. The phone, which had rung with Ethan's number on Mother's Day, remained silent. This absence of contact after her deliberate choice not to answer fueled a relentless churn of anxiety and self-doubt within her. Had she gone too far? Was this truly the right path? The echoes of Serafina's cruel words still resonated, but so did the ingrained habit of self-sacrifice, the lifetime of putting Ethan first. Seeking solace, or perhaps just a distraction from the relentless introspection, Eleanor found herself in the attic, retrieving a dusty box labeled Memories. She carried it downstairs to her comfortable armchair, the afternoon sun warming her lap as she opened the first album. Its pages were thick, brittle with age, filled with the sepia tones and faded colors of a life lived. She traced the smiling face of a young boy, her son Ethan, with a shock of unruly brown hair and a gap-toothed grin. Memories flooded back, sharp and vivid. There was Arthur, her late husband, his arm around a mischievous Ethan, their laughter almost audible. Eleanor remembered the day Arthur died, a sudden, brutal heart attack that stole him from them when Ethan was just 12. The world had tilted on its axis then. She had been left with a grieving child, a modest house, and a future that felt terrifyingly uncertain. But in that moment of profound loss, a fierce determination had ignited within her. Arthur had dreamed big for Ethan, for their son to have opportunities they hadn't. And Eleanor, shattered as she was, had made a silent vow to him, to herself, and to her son. She would fulfill those dreams, come what may. She closed her eyes, remembering the exhaustion. To keep their small world intact, she had worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, an administrative assistant during the day, her fingers flying across the keyboard, managing schedules and paperwork. Then evenings and weekends, she waited tables at a local diner, her feet aching, her smile often forced, but always there. Every extra dollar was meticulously saved, every penny accounted for. When even that wasn't enough, when college tuition loomed large and daunting, she hadn't hesitated. She took out a second mortgage on their home, her only significant asset, strapping herself with more debt, all for Ethan's education, for his future. Her life after Arthur had become singularly focused on Ethan. She never remarried, never truly pursued another personal relationship. There were opportunities, kind men who saw her quiet strength, but her heart and her purpose remained solely dedicated to fulfilling the future she and Arthur had envisioned for their son. He was her reason, her anchor, her entire world. She watched him thrive in college, a bright, ambitious young man, and felt a quiet pride that surpassed any personal ambition she might have harbored for herself. Then Serafina entered the picture. Eleanor remembered her initial thrill, a wave of relief that Ethan had finally found someone. Serafina was beautiful, undeniably intelligent, with an ambition and confidence that Eleanor initially admired. She seemed capable, self-assured, someone who would push Ethan to achieve even more. Eleanor saw her as a strong partner for her son, a woman who would help him build the successful, happy life they all wanted for him. The first tremor in this burgeoning hope came with the wedding plans. Serafina, with her impeccable taste and desire for perfection, insisted on a lavish affair, a destination wedding, then a grand reception at an exclusive venue. Eleanor had demurred, gently suggesting more modest options, but Serafina was unyielding, her polite but firm requests quickly morphing into subtle demands. Ethan, caught between, had looked to his mother, his eyes pleading. To avoid conflict, to ensure Ethan's happiness and Serafina's satisfaction, Eleanor had capitulated. She withdrew a significant sum from her modest 401k, incurring a hefty penalty, but the thought of seeing Ethan happy, of giving them the perfect start, outweighed the financial sting at the time. After the marriage, the distance between Eleanor and Ethan grew, a slow, insidious creep. Calls became less frequent, invitations rare. When they did visit, Serafina would often cut the visit short, citing various excuses: a prior engagement, the children's nap schedules, a sudden migraine. Eleanor learned to anticipate the polite but firm dismissal. Yet ironically, it was always financial needs that brought Eleanor back into their immediate family orbit, albeit temporarily. When a new car was needed, when a sudden medical bill appeared, when an investment opportunity arose, that was when Eleanor's phone would ring, and her presence was suddenly desired, even celebrated, for as long as it took for the funds to exchange hands. 3 years ago, the request had been significant. Ethan called, his voice hopeful and excited, asking for help with a down payment on a grand colonial house in a desirable neighborhood. It was beautiful, impressive, and far beyond what they could comfortably afford on their own, even with Ethan's then stable job. Eleanor, still clinging to the hope of inclusion, of being an integral part of their lives, had drained her last remaining savings, money she had earmarked for her own retirement, to secure the dream home for them. She told herself it was an investment in their happiness, in her grandchildren's future. Then, about a year and a half ago, came the real test. Ethan lost his job. It was a stressful time, and Eleanor offered to help in any way she could. She suggested they could downsize, move somewhere more affordable while he looked for new employment. Serafina, however, refused to even consider it. The colonial was her dream home, her status symbol. She wouldn't be moving. So Eleanor, fearing for their financial stability, fearing for her grandchildren's well-being, stepped in once more. She started paying their mortgage. It was meant to be a temporary measure, a bridge until Ethan found another job. But month after month, the checks were sent, and the temporary measure slowly, insidiously, became permanent. Her own financial security was steadily eroding, not for her own needs, but to maintain Serafina's desired lifestyle. Her reverie was abruptly shattered by the shrill ring of the telephone. Eleanor jumped, her heart pounding. She looked at the caller ID. It was Ethan. Her breath hitched. She knew exactly why he was calling. She picked up the phone, her hand steady, and brought it to her ear. "Mom, what is going on?" Ethan's voice was loud, demanding, devoid of any preamble or concern for her. The bank just called. They said the mortgage payment wasn't made. Why would you do that? Eleanor's hand was steady as she brought the phone to her ear, a newfound resolve hardening her features. Mom, what is going on? Ethan's voice boomed, thick with anger and incredulity. The bank just called. They said the mortgage payment wasn't made. Why would you do that? There was no hello, no inquiry into her well-being, just a direct, furious demand. Hello, Ethan, Eleanor replied, her voice surprisingly calm, a stark contrast to his agitated tone. Yes, that's correct. I am no longer making the mortgage payments. A stunned silence followed, broken only by Ethan's sharp intake of breath. What? What are you talking about? Mom, we had an agreement. You said you'd help us out until I got back on my feet. His shock was palpable, quickly morphing back into indignation. You can't just break an agreement like that. Eleanor closed her eyes for a brief moment, picturing the shattered teacups on the driveway, hearing Serafina's venomous words once more. Ethan, she began, her voice gaining strength. I stopped making the payments after Mother's Day. After I drove by your house, hoping to drop off a small gift for Serafina, and overheard her quite clearly, telling someone how she made sure I was excluded from your family-only lunch. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. She also stated I wasn't invited this year, or any year if I have my way, and that when that old hag finally goes into a nursing home, that would be cause for celebration. The raw honesty of recounting those words was painful but necessary. You were spying on us? Ethan retorted, the anger now mixed with an edge of defensiveness. Eleanor scoffed, a dry, humorless sound. Spying? No, Ethan. Your wife was speaking quite loudly outside your open window. It would have been difficult not to hear her. Ethan stammered, his usual confidence faltering. Mom, come on. She didn't mean it. You know Serafina, she was just venting. She gets stressed. His voice, however, lacked conviction. It was a flimsy excuse, one they had both used for years to justify Serafina's behavior. But this time, it felt hollow, even to him. Venting? Eleanor echoed, a sharp edge entering her voice. Venting about her mother-in-law who has done nothing but give to you both for years. Tell me, Ethan, what exactly have I done to warrant such contempt? What have I ever done but give until there was literally nothing left for myself? Her carefully constructed calm was beginning to fray. Ethan's tone shifted from anger to panic. Mom, please. We need that money. We can't make the payment on our own. You know that. We'll lose the house. And the urgency in his voice was stark, revealing the true depth of their reliance on her. Then sell the house, Ethan, Eleanor said, her voice firm, unwavering. Get something you can afford, something that doesn't require your elderly mother to work herself into an early grave just to keep a roof over your heads. Sell the house? Ethan practically shrieked. Mom, are you serious? The market is down. We'd lose money. And what about the kids? Moving would disrupt their school, their friends. He was grasping at straws, trying to pull on every emotional lever. Then his voice took on a new, ugly edge. This is blackmail, Mom. You're trying to punish us, using money because your feelings got hurt. Eleanor felt something shatter inside her, far more profoundly than the teacups on the driveway. To him, her lifelong sacrifices, her depleted retirement funds, her profound emotional pain, it was all just feelings getting hurt. It was trivialized, minimized, a petty squabble over wounded pride, not a foundational breach of respect and love. Her son, her only child, saw her as an ATM, not a mother worthy of basic human decency. My feelings got hurt? Eleanor repeated slowly, the words heavy with disbelief. Ethan, this isn't about my feelings being hurt. This is about respect. This is about a lifetime of sacrifice. I poured every penny I had, every ounce of energy, into giving you the best life possible after your father died. I worked 2 jobs, took out a second mortgage, emptied my 401k for your lavish wedding, drained my retirement savings for your down payment, and now I'm paying your mortgage, all while your wife wishes I was in a nursing home and calls me an old hag. Her voice trembled slightly, but the resolve held. Tell me, Ethan, when exactly did I become merely a source of funds rather than your mother? She took a deep breath, the air burning in her lungs. I won't do it anymore, Ethan. I won't set myself on fire to keep you and Serafina warm. Not one more penny, not one more drop of dignity. And with that, Eleanor pressed the end call button, severing the connection. The silence that followed was profound, but this time it wasn't anxious. It was powerful. She stood for a moment, her hand still on the phone, her heart pounding with a mixture of grief and exhilaration. A moment later, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was Ethan. Mom, please, don't hang up. We need to talk. Can I come over tomorrow? We need to figure this out. Eleanor read the message. She acknowledged it, but didn't immediately reply. Instead, she walked out to her small, beloved garden. The rose bushes needed pruning, and the petunias were drooping from thirst. There was work to be done, life to be tended, and for the first time in a very long time, Eleanor felt she was tending to her own life, not just everyone else's. The morning light felt sharper than usual as Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, a meticulously kept notebook open before her. Her stomach churned with a nervous anticipation she hadn't felt in years. She rehearsed her words silently, trying to anticipate Ethan's arguments, steeling herself against the inevitable accusations and pleas. It was a confrontation she had dreaded, but also one she knew had to happen. When Ethan's car pulled into her driveway, Eleanor watched him from the window. He looked tense, his shoulders hunched, and there were new lines etched around his eyes that made him look older than his 35 years. He stepped inside, not a greeting, not a hug, not even a perfunctory, "How are you, Mom?" His gaze immediately zeroed in on the kitchen table where the notebook lay. "Mom, we need to talk about this mortgage," he began, his voice tight with controlled anger. "The bank called again. They said if another payment is missed, we're facing foreclosure. This is serious." Eleanor met his gaze, her own unwavering. "I understand the gravity of the situation, Ethan, and my decision remains the same. I am no longer making those payments." Ethan scoffed, a short, frustrated sound. "Because of some stupid comment Serafina made? Mom, you're going to lose us our house over a misconstrued remark?" "It wasn't a stupid comment, Ethan," Eleanor countered, her voice calm but firm. "And it wasn't a single remark. It was the culmination of years of disrespect, of being treated as a resource rather than a person, of being an outsider in my own son's family." She slid the notebook across the table towards him. "Look at this, Ethan." Her finger pointed to a column of figures. "Since your marriage to Serafina, I have given you both over $300,000 in financial gifts. That's nearly my entire retirement savings, Ethan. Money I worked for, saved, for my own future. Not for yours, and certainly not for Serafina's." Ethan's eyes widened as he scanned the detailed entries. But you offered to help, Mom. You always said you wanted to help us. You never said these were loans." He looked up, his face a mixture of shock and indignation. "And you never declined, Ethan," Eleanor pointed out gently, but with a sting. "You never said, 'No, Mom, we'll manage.' You never even said thank you half the time. It was simply expected." She closed the notebook and leaned forward slightly. "And what about the other things? The countless times Serafina cut our visits short, the unannounced family vacations to which I was never invited, the time at your 5th anniversary party when I, your mother's, was seated at a table in the corner with business acquaintances I'd never met before while Serafina's entire extended family sat at the main table." Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his gaze dropping. He had no answer. Eleanor then produced a stack of envelopes from a drawer, placing them beside the notebook. "And these," she said, her voice softer, but carrying a deeper weight of pain, "these are birthday and Christmas cards I sent to your children over the past few years. They were all returned. Wrong address, the Postal Service said, but I verified the address every time. It means someone, Serafina, was actively returning them, making sure my efforts to connect with my grandchildren never even reached them." Ethan stared at the stack of unopened cards, his jaw slack. I didn't know about these, Mom, I swear." "No, I imagine you didn't," Eleanor said, a bitter taste in her mouth. "Because your wife made sure you wouldn't. And then there's this, Ethan. My granddaughter Clara asked me why I didn't love her anymore. Because, she said, Serafina told her that's why I never came around." Before Ethan could even begin to process this, the front door burst open and Serafina swept in, her face a mask of irritation. She didn't even acknowledge Eleanor, brushing past her to stand over Ethan. Did you get it, Ethan? Did you get her to sign the check? Just get her to sign the check and let's go. Serafina turned her attention to Eleanor, her eyes narrowing. Honestly, Eleanor, this is becoming childish. You're going to jeopardize our home, our children's stability, over some perceived slight? Her voice was laced with an impatient contempt. Just give us the money. After everything we've done for you, the least you can do is help us now. Eleanor let out a short, incredulous laugh. Everything you've done for me, she repeated, her voice rising with a sudden, fierce energy. You've done nothing for me, Serafina. You've taken my money, my time, my efforts, and you've systematically kept me from my own son and grandchildren. Serafina's composure snapped. Her face flushed an angry red. Oh, please. You're always hovering, always trying to manipulate Ethan with your guilt trips and your checkbook. Ethan, who had been silent, finally spoke, his voice quiet, almost defeated. We kinda do need her checkbook right now, Serafina. The admission hung heavy in the air, a stark validation of Eleanor's long-held financial role in their lives. Serafina's anger faltered for a second, then she forced a syrupy, sweet, artificial smile, turning back to Eleanor. Look, Eleanor, I'm sorry if I offended you. I really am. It was just a stressful day, and I spoke without thinking. I'm sure we can put this behind us, for Ethan's sake, for the children. Just give us the money for the mortgage, and we can— Eleanor cut her off, her voice devoid of emotion. The mortgage payment is no longer my responsibility, Serafina. Neither are you. The pretense of civility vanished from Serafina's face. Her eyes blazed with a raw, ugly fury. So this is it then? You're just going to abandon your son? After all these years trying to buy your way into our lives, now you're just going to turn your back because you're a needy, manipulative old woman who couldn't handle not being the center of attention. Eleanor looked from Serafina's contorted face to Ethan's pale, ashamed one. An odd sense of liberation washed over her. The truth, ugly as it was finally out. I think we have nothing more to discuss, she said, her voice clear and steady. Please leave my house, both of you. Ethan hesitated, his gaze lingering on the stack of returned cards, on the open notebook. A flicker of something, perhaps regret, crossed his face. But then Serafina, already halfway out the door, snapped, Ethan, let's go. He followed her, but before he stepped outside, he turned back to Eleanor, his voice a low whisper. Mom, I didn't know about the cards, or what she said to Clara, I swear. Eleanor simply watched him go, the door clicking shut behind them. She walked slowly to her sofa and sank onto its cushions, her body trembling. Not with fear or sadness, but with an unexpected fierce pride. She had stood her ground, and it felt both terrifying and magnificent. The weeks that followed the explosive confrontation passed in a strange, unsettling haze for Eleanor. Her home, once a sanctuary from her worries, now felt permeated by a profound silence. No calls from Ethan, no texts, nothing. It was exactly what she had said she wanted, what she had stood up for, yet the absence of contact was deafening, a vacuum she hadn't quite anticipated. Part of her, the old Eleanor, worried endlessly. The new Eleanor, however, tried to cultivate a quiet sense of peace, tending to her garden, rereading beloved books, and rediscovering the simple rhythms of a life lived for herself. Then, one Wednesday afternoon, the silence was abruptly shattered by a frantic knocking on her front door. Eleanor opened it to find her granddaughter, Clara, standing on the porch, her small face streaked with tears. Clara, all of 11 years old, clutched a worn backpack, her bicycle lying haphazardly on its side on the lawn. Her shoulders shook with suppressed sobs. Grandma, Clara choked out, her voice barely a whisper. I rode my bike here. I had to see you. Eleanor's heart constricted. She pulled Clara into a warm embrace, the child's small body trembling against hers. Clara, my sweet girl, what's wrong? Why are you crying? She led her inside, settling her onto the sofa. Between sniffles and gasps, Clara poured out her story. Mom and Dad are fighting all the time, Grandma. About the house and about you. Dad keeps saying the bank is going to take it away. They're going to foreclose. The words sounded ominous and terrifying coming from a child's mouth. Clara then looked up at Eleanor, her eyes wide and earnest. I missed you, Grandma, a lot. Mom said you didn't want to see us anymore, that you didn't love us. The cruel echo of Serafina's manipulation, so familiar now, twisted in Eleanor's gut. Oh, Clara, darling, that's not true, Eleanor said, her voice soft and reassuring. She pulled the child closer, stroking her hair. Grandma loves you and Daniel more than anything. Your dad and I just had a grown-up disagreement about respect. She wasn't ready to burden Clara with the full, ugly truth, but she needed to counter Serafina's narrative. Clara pulled back slightly, looking directly into Eleanor's eyes with the innocent bluntness of a child. Is it because Mom's mean to you? She called you a controlling witch. Eleanor flinched. The words were a fresh sting, a raw reminder of Serafina's true feelings, openly displayed now even to her children. She managed a weak smile. Sometimes adults say things they don't mean when they're angry. Sweetheart, let's not worry about that right now. How about some hot chocolate? Your favorite, with extra marshmallows. While Clara busied herself with the comforting ritual of making hot chocolate, Eleanor stepped into the other room and called Ethan. He answered almost immediately, his voice harried. Mom, is Clara there? She disappeared. We've been worried sick. The relief in his voice was evident. Yes, she's here. She rode her bike over, Eleanor confirmed, trying to keep her own tone neutral. She's upset, Ethan. She's worried about your fighting, about losing the house. A sigh escaped Ethan. I know, Mom, it's a mess. Look, I'll come pick her up right away. She's just settled in, Eleanor said gently. I was going to make her dinner. She misses you, Ethan, and she misses me. Serafina told her I didn't want to see you all anymore. Oh, Mom, Ethan groaned. Look, I appreciate it, but Serafina wouldn't be happy about her staying for dinner. You know how she gets. The old familiar pattern, Serafina's wishes dictating everything. But the new Eleanor emerged. Serafina doesn't have to know, does she? Eleanor suggested, her voice infused with a newfound boldness. Clara needs some comfort right now. She's terribly worried about your fighting. Wouldn't it be better if she had a quiet, normal evening for once? The silence on the other end of the line stretched. Then Ethan mumbled, Okay, fine. Let her stay for dinner. I need to talk to you anyway, Mom. I'll pick her up after. Eleanor felt a tiny victory. At least he was coming over, and Clara would have a reprieve from the tension at home. Ethan arrived just as the last vestiges of twilight faded. He looked even more exhausted than he had that morning, his clothes rumpled, his eyes heavy. He greeted Clara with a strained smile, then exchanged a few quiet words with Eleanor while Clara gathered her backpack, still clutching the remnants of her marshmallow-laden hot chocolate. As Clara made her way to the car, promising to call Eleanor soon, Ethan turned to his mother, his shoulders slumping. Mom, he began, his voice barely audible. I lost my job again. It was the third time in 5 years. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Eleanor simply nodded, her expression unreadable. She had suspected as much. His erratic employment had been a constant source of anxiety and a silent driver for her financial interventions. We've missed 2 mortgage payments now, he continued, running a hand through his hair. The bank, they started foreclosure proceedings. It's official. He looked away, unable to meet her gaze. And Serafina's parents, they can't help. Her father lost most of his retirement savings in a bad investment a few years ago. Serafina never wanted anyone to know. The revelation was a shock, another piece of Serafina's carefully constructed facade crumbling. It explains so much, her desperation, her refusal to downsize, her insistence on maintaining an image. Ethan finally met Eleanor's eyes, a look of profound defeat settling over his features. It's over, Mom. We're going to have to sell the house. We'll probably lose money given the market. It's all a mess. He sounded utterly resigned, a defeated man facing the wreckage of his choices. Eleanor looked at her son, his shoulders slumped in defeat, and felt a profound ache in her chest. The news of his job loss and the impending foreclosure was deeply distressing, but a new, stronger resolve prevented her from immediately offering the financial balm she once would have. Ethan, she said, her voice soft with genuine sympathy, I'm truly sorry to hear that. That's a terrible situation. But the unspoken words hung in the air. I'm sorry, but I won't be bailing you out this time. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled, almost torn envelope. From it, he extracted a small stack of unopened cards. They were the very birthday and Christmas cards Eleanor had shown him the day before, the ones returned with wrong address. But these were different. These were newer, pristine, clearly never having left the house. I found these, Mom, he whispered, his voice thick with shame. In Serafina's desk. There were more, years' worth. She kept them. She said she was protecting the kids from you. Eleanor's hands trembled as she took the cards, the carefully chosen designs, the heartfelt messages, all intercepted, all hidden. The depth of Serafina's deception, the calculated cruelty of keeping her grandchildren from their grandmother, stole her breath away. It wasn't just neglect, it was an active, malicious act. I, I didn't know about these, Mom, Ethan repeated, his voice barely audible. He looked up, his eyes filled with a raw, desperate honesty. I knew about some of her behavior, I did, but I didn't want to see it. I made excuses. I let her do it. A single tear traced a path down his cheek. And now she blames me for not handling you better, for letting you cut them off financially. She says it's my fault we're losing everything. Eleanor felt a bitter irony wash over her. After years of quietly enabling Serafina's behavior, Ethan was finally seeing the consequences, but only after his own comfort was threatened. She sighed. So, Ethan, she said, her voice weary, after all this, what is it that you want from me? He shook his head, looking down at his hands. I don't expect you to bail us out, Mom. I know I have no right to ask, not after everything. Eleanor simply nodded. No, she agreed, you don't. Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes red-rimmed. But, Mom, he pleaded, his voice cracking, I don't want to lose you. The kids need their grandmother, and I need my mom. The raw vulnerability in his voice was startling, a stark contrast to his earlier anger and defensiveness. It was the first time in years he had sounded like the son she remembered, the boy who had once depended on her so completely. Eleanor took a deep breath. This was the opening she had been waiting for, the chink in the armor of his denial. Ethan, after our last conversation, I consulted a lawyer about the house. His eyes widened, a flicker of fear in them. As you know, I contributed over $150,000 to the down payment and the subsequent mortgage payments. My lawyer informed me that I have a significant financial interest in that property. I have a claim against the sale proceeds, or I could even take partial ownership. A spark of something, hope perhaps, ignited in Ethan's eyes. What does that mean, Mom? It means, Eleanor explained, her voice gaining strength, that if I were to put money in now to stop the foreclosure, it wouldn't just be helping you out. It would be an investment in which I would become a co-owner of the house. We would both have an equitable stake. Ethan's face brightened, a desperate flicker of relief. Co-owner? So you could stop the foreclosure? We wouldn't lose the house? I could, Eleanor confirmed, but it would be under very specific conditions. She met his gaze, her expression firm. Firstly, I would have regular, unimpeded access to my grandchildren. No more return cards, no more made-up stories about why grandma doesn't come around. Secondly, I would be treated with basic human respect by both you and Serafina. No more old hag comments, no more dismissive attitudes, no more being treated like an ATM that only works when it's convenient. She paused, then added the most challenging condition. And thirdly, Serafina would need to offer a genuine, heartfelt apology for her behavior, not just for the sake of getting the money, but because she actually understands the pain she has caused. Ethan's face fell, the hope draining out of it as quickly as it had appeared. Mom, he said, his voice barely a whisper, Serafina will never do that. Not the apology, not genuinely. Eleanor held his gaze, her own unwavering. Then Ethan, she stated, her voice resonating with a quiet authority, it seems we've reached an impasse. If my dignity and the well-being of my relationship with my grandchildren cannot be respected, then there is no deal to be made. She rose from her chair, a clear signal. I think you should go now. Ethan slowly stood, his shoulders slumped once more. He looked utterly defeated, the weight of his choices crashing down on him. He mumbled a quiet goodbye and walked out the door, leaving Eleanor in the echoing silence of her home. That night, as darkness settled, Eleanor sat alone, reflecting. She had laid down her terms, terrifyingly firm, yet she knew deep in her heart they were right. She had finally prioritized herself, her worth, her boundaries. The future was uncertain, full of possibilities she couldn't yet imagine. But for the first time in a very long time, she felt like the captain of her own ship. Just before she drifted off to sleep, her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "Can we talk again tomorrow, Mom? Just us?" Eleanor picked up her phone. Her fingers, no longer trembling, typed a single word. Yes. Ethan arrived the next morning, alone as promised. He looked utterly drained, the dark circles under his eyes even more pronounced than the day before. Eleanor noticed immediately that his left hand, usually adorned with his gold wedding band, was bare. The sight sent a fresh pang through her, a mix of concern and a grim understanding of the escalating situation. He sank onto the sofa, avoiding her gaze. "We had a huge fight, Mom," he confessed, his voice hoarse. "About the cards, about everything you said, about how she's treated you." He ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. She said she'd rather live in a cardboard box than apologize to you." The words, though not entirely unexpected, still stung Eleanor. To hear such raw, unbending defiance, even when faced with losing their home, was a testament to Serafina's deep-seated resentment. Yet Eleanor maintained her composure. This was no longer about immediate emotional reaction. It was about the long game. Ethan tried almost instinctively to defend his wife. "She's just so stressed, Mom, and she's embarrassed about her parents' finances. She feels like everyone's judging her." Eleanor listened patiently, then gently interjected. "Ethan, I understand stress, but that doesn't excuse cruelty. And Serafina's parents, that's another thing. You just learned about your father-in-law's financial struggles. Did you ever wonder why Serafina always put up such a front about their wealth? Always had to have the best, regardless of the cost to us." He looked surprised. "What do you mean, us?" "She always had this belief," Ethan continued, as if recalling a deeply ingrained narrative, "that you just coasted on Dad's life insurance, that you played the victim card and used it to manipulate everyone into feeling sorry for you, while she and her family were the ones who truly earned their way." Eleanor felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. This was the core of it, the toxic seeds Serafina had planted and nurtured in Ethan's mind. "Ethan," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "Arthur's life insurance was a meager $25,000. It barely covered his funeral expenses and kept us afloat for a few months. After that, I worked. 2 jobs, often 3, day and night, to keep a roof over your head and to put you through college. There was no coasting, only sheer hard work and sacrifice." Ethan's face was a mixture of dawning horror and profound shame. I remember you working, Mom." "I do. But Serafina, she always had a way of, I just chose to believe her, didn't I?" He looked at her, his eyes glistening. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I was a fool." Eleanor didn't offer immediate absolution. The apology was genuine, but the years of willful blindness couldn't be erased in an instant. "Where are you staying, Ethan?" she asked, changing the subject. "A motel," he mumbled. "I told Serafina I needed some space to think. The kids are with her." He looked at Eleanor, a tentative hope in his eyes. "Mom, she goes to yoga Saturday mornings. Would you be willing to come with me to see the children? Just for a few hours?" Eleanor hesitated. The idea of sneaking around behind Serafina's back went against her nature. But the thought of seeing Clara and Daniel, of reaffirming her love, was too strong to resist. "Only this once, Ethan," she said, her voice firm. "The children shouldn't suffer for our adult disagreements. But this isn't a long-term solution." He nodded, relieved. "No, I know, it's not." He then looked around her familiar living room, his gaze settling on the sturdy furniture, the well-loved books. "Mom, about the lawyer's advice again. If Serafina doesn't apologize, or if we can't figure out the co-ownership, what happens then?" Eleanor reiterated, "My options are clear. I can assert my financial claim against the house, which means when it sells, I get my investment back first. Or if we reach an agreement, I can help stop the foreclosure, but it would be as a co-owner with my name on the deed, not just as a silent benefactor. And she emphasized the co-ownership, letting him understand that her investment would come with actual legal ownership and therefore a say. Ethan listened, his head bowed. When she finished, he looked up, his eyes pleading. Mom, I'm so sorry for everything, for not seeing what was happening, for letting Serafina treat you that way, for taking your help for granted. Eleanor reached across and gently squeezed his hand. I never doubted your love, Ethan, she said softly, but love without respect isn't enough. It never has been. After Ethan left, promising to call about Saturday, Eleanor walked into the spare room, which had become a repository for forgotten things. She began sorting through old boxes, a restless energy driving her. Tucked away in a dusty corner, she discovered an old wooden box filled with sketchbooks. She pulled one out, its pages filled with charcoal drawings, vibrant watercolors. A landscape from a college trip, a detailed portrait of Arthur, a whimsical sketch of a young Ethan chasing a butterfly. A forgotten passion stirred within her. She had loved art, sketching, painting. It had been her solace, her joy, before life, marriage, and motherhood had led her down a more sensible path. She ran her fingers over the faded drawings, a sudden, powerful urge seizing her. Impulsively, Eleanor drove to the nearest art supply store. She bought charcoals, a new sketchbook, a set of vibrant pastels. Back home, she sat at her kitchen table, the sun streaming in, and began to sketch. Her hand felt rusty, uncertain at first, but soon the lines flowed, the colors blended. Something inside her, long dormant, began to wake up. The next day, she saw a flyer for art classes at the community center. Without a moment's hesitation, she signed up. In the warm, brightly lit studio, she met Beatrice, a retired librarian, Sylvie, a spirited grandmother with a wicked sense of humor, Evelyn, a quiet woman who painted breathtaking landscapes, and Penelope, a vibrant artist who taught the class. They welcomed her, their shared passion for art forging an immediate bond. They talked about life, about starting anew, about the joy of reinvention. And Eleanor, for the first time in years, felt a true sense of belonging. A year. A full, tumultuous year had passed since that painful Mother's Day confrontation, since the shattering of a teacup and the even greater shattering of Eleanor's illusions. It was Mother's Day again, and the morning air in Eleanor's kitchen was filled with the sweet, comforting scent of homemade cinnamon rolls baking. Outside, the tulips from her own garden bloomed in vibrant shades of red and yellow, a testament to growth and renewal. As she arranged a fresh bouquet, a sound of excited chatter, followed by the familiar thump of small feet, heralded their arrival. Grandma! Clara, now a little taller, her eyes shining, rushed in for a hug, quickly followed by Leo, who, at 7, was all boisterous energy. Ethan entered behind them, a wrapped gift in his hand, and a sheepish, yet genuinely warm, grin on his face. He looked different, lighter, less burdened. Happy Mother's Day, Mom, Ethan said, giving her a hug that felt more sincere, more heartfelt than any he had offered in years. Clara, unable to contain her excitement, held up a brightly colored painting. Look, Grandma, I made this in art class. Remember you said I had a good eye for color? Her pride was infectious, and Eleanor's heart swelled. Just months ago, Clara had thought her grandmother didn't love her. Now she was flourishing, her budding artistic talent encouraged by Eleanor, a subtle, beautiful thread weaving them back together. Eleanor took a moment. Watching her grandchildren, her son. So much had changed. After their last conversation, Ethan and Serafina's house had indeed gone into foreclosure. Eleanor, after much deliberation, had chosen not to pursue her legal claim. The lawyer had confirmed her strong position, but Eleanor realized some prices were simply too high. To fight for ownership, to entangle herself further in their bitter affairs, felt like a step backward, a compromise of the very dignity she had fought so hard to reclaim. She had let it go, accepting the financial loss as the final cost of her freedom. 2 months after that fateful confrontation, Ethan and Serafina's marriage, unable to withstand the relentless financial stress and the harsh glare of exposed truths and long-held lies, had finally dissolved. They separated, And a few weeks later, Serafina moved to California with the children, seeking a fresh start closer to her now struggling parents. Eleanor had braced herself for the children to be poisoned against her, but surprisingly, Serafina, perhaps too consumed by her own problems, hadn't done so. Ethan, for his part, had found a modest apartment in the city, shedding the burden of a house he couldn't afford and a lifestyle he could no longer maintain. He found a new job, a steady, less glamorous position that, crucially, provided stability. He visited the children monthly in California, making the long trip each time, quietly rebuilding his relationship with them. Then, 6 months ago, another turn. Serafina had met someone new in California, someone who brought her a sense of peace Eleanor hadn't witnessed before. With this new relationship, Serafina made a surprising decision. She agreed to let Clara and Leo live with Ethan, granting generous visitation rights for herself. She recognized that the children needed stability, and Ethan, now on a steady path, could provide it. And so, 3 months ago, Clara and Leo had returned home, settling into a rental house Ethan had found remarkably just a few streets away from Eleanor. She was no longer an outsider. She was a true, active grandmother once more, present in their daily lives, helping with homework, baking cookies, and sharing in their joys and sorrows. "Go on, open it, Mom," Ethan prompted, his eyes sparkling. Eleanor carefully unwrapped the gift. Inside the box was a beautifully framed photograph. It was a picture of her, Clara, and Leo standing proudly in front of one of her watercolor paintings at a local community art show. Her painting, a vibrant landscape of her garden, sporting a small honorable mention ribbon. "That's for your painting, Grandma," Leo exclaimed, bouncing on his toes. "And for being the best grandma ever," Clara added, hugging her tightly. A lump formed in Eleanor's throat. This was the true prize, not a lavish house, but the pure, unadulterated love and presence of her family. "And speaking of good news," Ethan said, a casual lightness in his tone, "I got that promotion I told you about. Finally able to put some money aside. And Mom," he continued, his voice softening, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about love and respect. It really sank in, watching you after everything, your resilience, your self-respect. It's been an education for me." He paused, then looked at her with renewed determination. "My goal now is to buy a house again, but this time I'm going to do it right, on my own, living within my means. No more relying on you, Mom. You've given enough." As if on cue, Clara and Leo returned from the garden, their small hands clutching a bouquet of bright yellow dandelions, which they proudly placed on the table next to Eleanor's tulips. They all sat down to a late Mother's Day lunch, the scent of cinnamon rolls mingling with the fresh-cut flowers. Ethan raised his glass of sparkling cider. "To Mom," he said, his voice ringing with sincerity, "for teaching us what truly matters." "To Grandma," Clara and Leo echoed, clinking their glasses against hers. Eleanor smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached her eyes. Her life had indeed transformed. Her weekly art group with Beatrice, Sylvie, and Evelyn was a highlight, her watercolors improving with each stroke. Just last week, a local gallery had agreed to display some of her work. She was rediscovering parts of herself she had thought long lost, or perhaps never fully realized. And then there was one last, unexpected development. Last week, a small, elegantly penned card had arrived in her mailbox. It was from Serafina, a concise, formal apology. Not effusive, not overly emotional, but clear and, for Serafina, remarkably genuine. Eleanor appreciated it. It was a recognition, a validation of her pain, but it didn't ignite a desire to resume a close relationship. She had moved on. Later that afternoon, as the children played in the garden, Ethan joined Eleanor on her porch swing. The sun was warm, the breeze gentle. "Happy?" he asked, his gaze earnest. Eleanor looked at him, truly looked at her son. She saw the journey he had made, the mistakes he had owned, the man he was slowly but surely becoming. He had come back to himself, and in doing so had come back to her, not as a source of funds, but as a son. "Yes, Ethan," she answered truthfully, her voice soft with contentment. "I'm happy." She felt present, respected, and loved for who she was, not for what she could give. She looked out at her vibrant garden, at the blooming tulips, at the dandelions her grandchildren had gathered. The price of dignity had been high, but infinitely worthwhile. She looked forward to continuing to create the life she wanted, one brushstroke at a time.